Good morning, colleagues. I hope you are healthy and that you are safe this morning. It is the last week of our 3-week series when running isn't an option. I hope you've enjoyed the last couple of weeks. We've really been overwhelmed with the amount of support that we've received, with the amount of people that have actually engaged with us. And I hope today will also be a day like that, where you will feel encouraged and you will feel you walk away with a new skill, maybe for yourself. That's the purpose, is for yourself. But also then hopefully, as you can learn how to manage your own emotions better, also those of your clients. So we've got a panel again this morning. One or two of them said that they've got clients until 8 o'clock. So I see Miriam, you've joined us. Dr. Miriam Close is a psychiatrist. Miriam, I don't know if you just want to say hello to everybody.
Morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today in this series, and I hope it's been beneficial and you're feeling supported. And yeah, thanks. I'm sure we've got another great session ahead of us.
Excellent. Okay. So by means of just checking in this morning, I'm going to go back to something I've shared the last couple of weeks, and it's for those that I know many of you are joining for the first time this morning. Some of you are joining. This is the third time you're joining. So I'm just going to go back to the beginning. Okay. So in essence, there are three key reasons why people attend a group like this. They are here either to learn and to listen, to gain new knowledge or skills, or secondly, they're curious about what we're doing. They just want to look. It's perfectly fine. You want to learn something, you want to look. Second reason is you want to link up, you want support of other practitioners, you want to support other practitioners, you want to be an active participant, and towards the end of the day, we're going to say what's next, and you'll see what we're going to do as well. And then lastly, you're here because you need support or motivation. And for those of you that have contacted us and said we need support, need motivation, we've obviously linked you with the appropriate people. Now, as a means of checking in today, I'd like you just to tell me which of these three you are. Are you someone that's here today to listen? Are you someone here to link up? Or are you here to say, I actually need support today? It doesn't only have to be one of them, it can be a couple of them. But I'd like you just to tell me which one of these three is most prominent for you today. Okay. Okay. Excellent. So just as also to set the agenda for today, the purpose of the Renew groups, the focus really is on your mental health as a healthcare professional. It's therapy for the therapist, and to learn skills or motivation, or to access resources. Depending on what your need is, you're welcome to engage us on any of these levels. Okay, once again, in the first week, we covered three very important concepts, and I'm just going to recheck in on those. I'm not going to check in on last week's concepts because this is foundational. The three states of mind: you've got rational mind, you've got emotional mind, you've got wise mind in the middle. Rational mind being the cold mind, the mind that's very logical and rational the whole time. Emotional mind being hot mind, where you respond and there's a lack of rationality. And a lot of times, both us and our clients are in that space where we, especially during this time, where we get pushed beyond our boundaries so we can actually contain our own emotions. and then we in emotion mind. And the whole thing about dialectical behavior therapy is that you're able to integrate these two into something called wise mind, where you actually say, I'm using my rational side, I'm using my emotional side, and I'm getting somewhere in the middle, I'm finding my wise mind. What skills we covered, we're going to cover that a little bit later again, and you're going to see how all of this fits together. One thing I just need to say is these 3 weeks are some of the skills we found. It's in one category of DBT, and it's called the stress tolerance skills. There are 3 other modules which we've maybe touched on by the way in the last couple of weeks, but it's also important for you to know that there's in fact the 3 weeks we've covered are part of 3 weeks of a 24-week program. So it's really introductory information, and I hope it's been useful. So the what skills we can look at later, and obviously in the how skills we checked in on in the first week. Okay, so we're continuing this series, and the first week we said we want to look for a model for flattening the emotional curve. All of us are talking about flattening the curve of infections, the curve of deaths of the pandemic. But for today, we looked at DBT as the 4 primary ways to respond to a serious problem in life. The first week we looked at change how you feel about the problem through emotional regulation and mindfulness. Secondly, we look at how to tolerate and accept it, the stress tolerance, reality acceptance. That's what we looked at last week, accepting what we got, not what we wanted. And then the third way to respond to serious problems in life, and that's what we're going to look at today, is figure out how to solve the problem. Okay, and that's what we're looking at today. Today we're looking at how to survive the crisis. And then obviously the fourth one, which Marshall and put in there, and it's to stay miserable or possibly make it worse. Okay, so that's the fourth alternative, how to actually solve life's problems, which obviously doesn't solve the problem, it just makes things worse. Okay, so today the topic we're going to cover is going to be when running isn't an option. Now, as a way to get into the room, as a mindfulness exercise, we did it last week as well, but I would like you to find a comfortable space with both feet on the ground. I'd like you to sit nice and comfortable with your hands facing upwards on your thighs. And I'd like you to take just a few deep breaths. With your hands open, I'd like you to tell me, what are you observing in terms of your own thoughts and emotions right now? So it's observing your thoughts and emotions, but then the next question would be, which of those do you need to let go of this morning? We spoke about reality acceptance last week. Which of these emotions are actually hurting you at the moment? So it's about just observing your thoughts, observing your emotions, and then asking the question, which one of them do I need to let go of this morning? I'm going to give you guys about 30 seconds for that. Okay. So this is the last week of our 3-week series, When Running Isn't an Option. And today we're looking at surviving the crisis. Now, most of us are finding during this time, either in our personal lives, we are stretched beyond the point where we are using our normal resources in our coping strategies, our social interactions, to really cope with the emotional intensity of being in a lockdown, maybe financial difficulties you might be having at the moment because of the lockdown. So there's so many things that's being thrown our way that most of us might never have faced. So it's about surviving the crisis. Now today, the last 2 weeks, I've shared some stories, I've shared some ideas. Today really is going to be something that I want to be. I want to give you guys a tool that you can use, so I'm going to explain a lot more about that. So today's going to be more practice based, where you can say, I've got something that I can use for myself, but I can also use this for my clients. Now, the first question is, if I say I want to survive a crisis, what is a crisis? Now, DBT, when looking at a crisis, it describes it as you're in a crisis when the situation is firstly highly stressful. In other words, there's something that is happening right now that is pushing you beyond a level where you feel like I can actually manage this emotionally. The second component of a crisis is then that it's short term. That is, it won't last a long time. A crisis, in other words, has got a definite timeline to it. I think right now, what's one of the challenges I'm having, especially with patients, is that the lockdown initially was said to be 3 weeks, and then it's gone into 5 weeks. And so the timeline of this of the crisis is just being delayed. Now there's uncertainty about what's going to happen next. But the point is, the very definition of a crisis, if I want to use an example, so let's say you go and you've got a wedding to attend, and it's in America, and there's somewhere along the line there's a connecting flight you have to catch. You kind of, where the connecting flight's due to take place, you arrive there and you find out that the flight's been cancelled. That's an example of a crisis. It is a short-term problem. It's not something that's long-term. And lastly, it's something that creates intense pressure to resolve the crisis right now. In other words, it's not something you can delay. It's something that you need to resolve right now. And it's important to know when to use, from a dialectical behavior therapy perspective, when to use these crisis skills. You use it when you have intense pain that cannot be helped or solved quickly. You use it when you want to act on your emotions, but it will only make things worse. The third thing is you use when you're in an emotional mind and it threatens to overwhelm you and you need to stay skillful. You are overwhelmed, yet demands must be met. You don't use crisis survival skills for everyday problems, for solving all your life problems, and for making your life worth living. And you'll understand kind of what this means as we go along today, because the thing about the crisis survival skills, it is meant for that crisis moment, for that moment when you feel like you're dysregulated. You need to get yourself regulated again. You need to get into the wise mind space for you to be able to respond more effectively. A very important concept in DBT is then being effective in the situation. And if you are dysregulated, it becomes very hard for you to actually respond in a logical and a rational and a wise mind way. So this is a crisis. So this is the context for crisis survival skills. Now, this is a graph that I've shared a few times, but I want to share it again today because this is such an important framework for you to be able to work with when defining a crisis, and also looking for the crisis in your own life. And also, as I teach you the skill a little bit later around how to help someone regulate the crisis, that you have this framework. Okay. So I'm just going to draw something on my iPad for you. Okay. So the idea is that we've got a regulation zone here in the middle. Okay. This is where normal human emotions take place. All of us have those. But now the emotions that go upwards in terms of this graph are emotions with more energy. So that typically would be anger, frustration, anxiety. Okay. Those are emotions with more energy. Obviously, emotions with less energy, that would be depression, that would be grief, etc. Those are emotions with less energy related to them. Now, why I draw this again is because it's important as we go along that you understand where survival skills come in. So survival skills come in when there's been a prompt in the environment and they've gone beyond this zone right here, which I call the regulation zone. They've gone beyond that zone, they're up here, and I call that the danger zone. Okay. That's when they say and do things that cause them shame and guilt at a later stage. Now, down here is where there's an emotional crisis that has got, obviously, the mood is really low. So that is someone that down here, they might actually be in danger of self-harm. They might be, suicidal, or they might just be in a space. I call this down here the dungeon. I call it, sorry, my writing's terrible there. So I call it down here, I call it the dungeon, because when someone is down there, they go there very quickly, they're in a crisis, and they experience that as something that is not necessarily going to end. In other words, they feel like there's no windows, there's no lock, there's no door, it's just I'm in this space and it's so dark, I don't know if I'm ever going to get out of this. So I'm going to pause this right here because I want to go on to the next slide, because I think as we go along, you'll start seeing why this is really relevant. So there's something called a chain analysis that I'd like to introduce. Now, the chain analysis is in DBT, I would say probably one of the most important tools to use, because it allows you to describe your own behavior and to find the links in the chain of where the behavior, where it was activated, where the prompting event was, etc. And remember, DBT is a behavioral therapy. So when you are looking at helping someone, you're looking to help them identify the links in the chain that took them to the problem behavior. Now, one thing I need to just make it very clear, it's almost like T's and C's to me explaining this. In explaining this today, it's going to be as it's relevant to you as a therapist, and possibly how you can use it with clients. And why I say that is when wanting to use this with clients, in one of our workshops, we actually take half a day to work with the chain analysis. So it's something I'm going to introduce. And if you want to know more about it, you can obviously ask us. But it's important for you to also know that it is quite a complex model to use, but it is also something that I find I use it literally every single day. So the utility of it is there. Okay, so the chain analysis. Firstly, there's a prompting event. So let's start in another place. Let's start with the problem behavior. I'm going to share my iPad screen again because I want to actually unpack this a bit more. So when looking at a chain analysis, firstly, we're looking to identify what is the problem behavior. And that is usually the behavior that's causing someone consequences, okay? So firstly, when working with a client or with a patient or whatever, you're looking to identify what is the problem behavior? What is the behavior that's actually brought them to therapy? In your case, you're looking for what are the behaviors that's actually where someone has gone in a crisis situation. What are the behaviors that someone usually does when they go above or beneath the regulation zone? Very, very important. You're looking for those behaviors that someone is saying, these are things that that's causing me such negative consequences. I need to change this behavior. So first, you're looking to identify what's the problem behavior. The second thing you're looking to identify what is the prompting event. So the prompting event is that event that sets the wheels in motion. I had a case a few years ago, and obviously whenever I do share examples, it's because I've asked the person's permission to share it. I had a patient a few years ago that came to see me after they worked for a fast food restaurant. And when they got fired, they actually hit their boss. So as they got fired, they hit their boss. And obviously there were certain legal ramifications, but the point is, for them, the problem behavior thing was physically striking their boss. Now, that obviously would be the problem behavior. But when I asked the person what happened, they said it just happened. I don't know how many of you have also had clients that you're working on something, you're working so hard on something, and you feel like you're making progress, and then they walk in and they've done the thing that you've been working on, and then they say it just happened. Okay, so I find this is a very useful tool, especially for those individuals that say it just happened. So we're looking at firstly defining what is the problem behavior, what happened, what is it that was the problem, what caused the negative consequences. But then we're looking at what was the prompting event, what was the thing that set the wheels in motion. So in his case, when we unpacked it, it was actually that his boss smirked at him. So up to when he got fired, he was still relatively okay with that because he knew he'd done certain things to get fired. But when his boss smirked at him, that set the wheels in motion. So for him, the prompting event was not so much getting fired, but his boss smirking at him. So in between the prompting event and where the problem behavior takes place, there are these little links in the chain. And these links in the chain have to do with what are the emotional changes and the cognitive changes. And based on these changes, what is the action urge that develops? So what is the urge? Because remember, DBT is a behavioral therapy. So what is the urge? What is the thing? The prompting event took place. The person's body has changed. This is where mindfulness becomes so important, because if a patient is able to identify how my thoughts have changed, now my body has changed, they're able to identify a lot earlier when they're about to go over into problem behavior. Which, like I said, is a whole half-day workshop. But the point is, the idea is to teach a patient, you start with mindfulness and you show them how to actually become aware of their own thoughts, how to become aware of their own emotions. When the prompting event takes place, they're able now to activate that mindfulness part of themselves when they become aware how their emotions, how their cognitions have changed, and how the action urge then develops. Because as long as someone is still on this side of this line, they're still able to be very skillful. The moment they get into the problem behavior section, then they just start managing the consequences of their problem behavior. Okay. Now, what comes before this, obviously, are, I'm just going to write that in black again. What comes before this is obviously the vulnerability factors. And that is usually the things that happen 24 to 48 hours before the event, the prompting event. And those could be anything from, I haven't been sleeping well, I haven't been eating well, I had a fight with my partner, I'm on a final written warning at work. It can be a variety of different things that actually make someone vulnerable for the prompting event. Okay, now, if I go back there again, so these are the links in the chain. Now, what's very important is the prompting event is only a prompting event because of someone's interpretation of the prompting event. That's a very, very important idea. Because if someone interprets the problem behavior, interprets the prompting event as not threatening or not important, it's not going to be prompting. That's quite obvious. It's not going to be prompting because the person doesn't experience it as such. We might have two people getting in the same car accident, but the one person never drives again, and the other person gets in their car when they leave the hospital. So in other words, it's up to our interpretation of the event, not so much the event itself. Okay. It's something I just want to play you guys. It's something I find quite humorous. And this has to do with interpretation of certain situations which you might get it wrong quite badly.
AmeriQuest Mortgage, proud sponsor of the NFL.
I don't hate your mother. Morning, Bev.
America.
Okay, so those are just some examples of don't judge too quickly. And it's about your interpretation of the event. I mean, this is CBT 101, but it's about the event itself is not so much the problem as your interpretation of the event. And I think in DBT, especially when we're looking at what are the behaviors that we want to change, then we're actually saying, what are the, at the time of the prompt, what is our interpretation? How did our thoughts change? How did our emotions change? Okay. So as we go over into the skills part that I'd like to show you guys, I'd like you to take just take 1 minute, and I'd like you to think of an instance. Ignore steps 2 to 4. I'm going to send you these slides. So the steps 2 to 4 is actually at the end of the exercise. But I'd like you to not so much do a chain analysis. We don't have time for that. But I'd like you to take a few seconds and think of an event or a time when you became dysregulated, when there was problem behavior, when there was something that you went over to, that later on you felt a sense of shame and guilt about, that you felt, I wish I didn't do that. And that could be either when your emotions went upwards, or it could be when your emotions went downwards. You were above or below the regulation zone, and you did and said things that you wish you could change the behavior. I want you to do that. And then I just want you to think of what prompted it. We're not going to go into detail now. I just want you to think of what was the behavior, describe the behavior, and then what prompted it. If you want to, you can share it in the chat column. If not, that's perfectly fine. I just want to remind you guys as well, there is a Q&A section. We've got a panel. We've got, at the moment, 3, but 3 is going to, Dr. Ramasal is going to join us a bit later as well. We've got a panel that's actually waiting for Q&A. So if you've got any questions in the meantime, please ask them. So do a chain analysis, but I'd like you to only focus on the problem behavior part and then on the prompting event part. I want you to focus on those 2 areas. Okay. Okay, so I want to dive into a few skills. because it's important to also see where I can actually use these skills. Because remember, we're looking at surviving the crisis. For us as healthcare professionals, but also for our clients, we want to be able to give them certain things that they can very practically use when faced with these situations. So the first skill that that you can use is something called the stop skill. Now, I know there are multiple variations of the skill in different therapeutic modalities, but in DBT specifically, there's a lot of acronyms. So you want to look at the stop skill. So when someone is in an emotional crisis, they've recognized, I'm in this dysregulation zone. I'm either up top or I'm down at the bottom. It's about when they can feel their body changing, when they can feel like their thoughts are changing, they can feel a physical response. They're mindful enough to say, well, I can feel there's a physical reaction here. They're able to stop. And the idea is here to really freeze, stop. I think you can understand why these skills aren't necessarily for everyday problems. Because if you just stop and freeze for everyday problems, you're going to look a bit silly. So the idea is to stop, freeze. Firstly, you're saying we can rather deal with the questions around why didn't you respond than dealing with the consequences of responding. Do not move a muscle. Your emotions may try to make you act without thinking. Stay in control. The T is for take a step back from the situation. Take a break. Let go. Take a deep breath. Do not let your feelings make you act impulsively. So, and then the O is for observe, and that's where mindfulness skills comes in. Are they able to then say, I'm able to observe my own thoughts and my emotions, and the P is then proceed mindfully. So the idea is not avoidance. The idea is not that this person now becomes this passive individual that never responds to anything. The idea is there's a crisis situation. They've noticed they're dysregulated. They can feel the prompt is taking place. They can feel their body has changed, their thoughts has changed, their emotions have changed. They can observe those. And before they go over into the problem behavior, they're actually able to use the skill to stop. Now, it's a skill that I teach quite early on, especially if I realize that someone does have difficulties regulating their emotions, because I find this very effective for them just to get themselves out of the situation and then being able to step back into it the moment they have regulated themselves, because then they go back into the regulation zone. Once they're back in the regulation zone, they're able to respond in a much more effective way. So it's stop, take a step back, observe, and then proceed mindfully. I think you can already start seeing where mindfulness comes into this, because it's very hard to use a skill if you're not mindful of your own emotions and your own thoughts. The second crisis survival skill is something that we actually covered in our very first week of doing this 3-week series. But it's a skill that I found very powerful and that I sometimes use as well, especially when I'm dealing with patients that are really dysregulated themselves. And that's just self-soothing using your senses. Now, self-soothing your senses then is about what can I see, hear, taste, smell, and feel. And obviously then a sixth sense would be movement. Now, this is something that I recommend and I do quite early on with my patients. And that could be in the form of a mindful shower. It could be in the form of having a mindful coffee. And those are using your senses. Now, if someone is in a crisis situation and they want to get themselves out of the crisis situation and they want to get into the regulation zone again, it could be something like leaving the room. It could be something like saying, I just want to quickly go to the bathroom. It could be something like, especially when someone gets home. I do this with a lot of my clients that work the whole day, and they say I get home and I feel so tense from work and I can't get into my family life. I use this exercise with them. I say sometimes just walk through the garden, take your shoes off, make sure you feel the grass under your feet. In other words, you activating your senses for you to be able to respond in a more effective way at a later stage. Now, and then the last skill is the tip skill. Now, this is quite a fun skill, because it is something that that initially when people hear it, they feel like it's some kind of a trick, or it's some kind of they don't initially believe that it can work, but I found it very, very effective. So the T is for changing your body's temperature. Now, changing your body's temperature in this case DBT suggests something like splashing cold water in your face. DBT, in other words, you're looking to change your body temperature, splashing cold water in your face. Using a cold object, it could be ice, rubbing it on your face. It could be using peas that's maybe in the fridge, rubbing it on your face. So those are all ways of changing your body's temperature. I find people that they say, especially in summer, they jump in the swimming pool. It's a very sudden way of changing your body's temperature. Some people actually, when they're in the car, they blast the aircon, cold air on their face. And the idea is here is that you're helping someone just to drop their body's temperature, which brings them back into the regulation zone actually quite quickly. If it's called the dive response, where you get that cold water, you get that cold air, and you do that. Take that deep breath. Okay, so crisis survival situations are when there's a prompting event and you're actually using your body's temperature, dropping body's temperature, which allows you to get back into the regulation zone. The I is for intense exercise, that goes without saying, and it's about, I find that especially with people during this time, it's quite challenging when they're used to using the skill of intense exercise, and they can't exercise right now. So now they're having to find different ways of dealing with the crisis situation. Individuals that do use this as a crisis survival skill, I find it very effective. And for individuals that aren't prone to exercise, for them it could be something like just a brisk walk around the block. It could be, sometimes people that say, I don't really exercise. And I say, well, do you go to malls? And they say, well, yes, I go to malls. I love shopping. I said, well, walk from one side to the other side of the mall, but maybe just do it more intentionally. And then obviously paced breathing and paired muscle relaxation is an exercise we did in our very first week, which once again, I find very, very effective. It is something you can do without people noticing. And I think that's why I find it very effective. It's something that someone can do in an exercise, when they're in a meeting, when they're in a stressful situation they can't necessarily get out of. They can focus on their breathing, nice deep breath in, and as they're breathing in, they kind of tense up their muscles. They try to tense up the muscles as much as they can from head to toe, and as they're breathing out, they're just letting go. Like I said, useful skill because people don't necessarily notice that you're doing it, but once you do the skill, like I said, I found it very, very effective. Okay, so surviving the crisis situation, just to recap what I've said today, is firstly about having the framework of the regulation zone, and then saying, when someone is prompted from their environment and they go above the regulation zone, what are the ways that I can help them, that you as healthcare professionals, that I can actually help you to say, how do I get myself down from this? And it's about change. It's about firstly being aware of what are the emotional changes that have taken place, what are the thought processes that have changed, what is my physical response that has changed, and how has that in the past led me to problem behavior. I found that doing a chain analysis with someone is often like watching if you've ever played sports, it's like playing the game on the Saturday, but then on the Monday you actually you watch the game again and you see where did we go wrong, and where could we have done things differently, and then you maybe teach new skills so that the next time someone engages with it, they are actually able to say, well, I can do things differently. You can practice it. And like I said, I think the utility of a chain analysis is tremendous, to be honest. So that was the chain analysis we looked at. Then we looked at, okay, but what are some of these skills that I can actually use? And then we looked at the stop skill very briefly. We looked at using your self-soothing, using your six senses. And finally, we looked at the tip skill. I'm going through these really quickly. There's so much more, and I'll maybe tell you guys a bit about training opportunities a bit later on. Okay, so I'd like to jump over to our panel because I see there's a couple of people that already asked questions. I'm just going to go there. Okay, so there's someone that asked, can someone be in both sides, above and below the regulation zone, for example, anxiety and depression? how often occurs together, what would you manage first, how would you approach this, especially with regards to the crisis. Is there anyone on the panel that would like to answer this? I mean, I don't mind answering it myself, but is there anybody that would like to answer this? Annika, maybe you've noticed that some of your clients, they walk in and, you kind of notice that they're both anxious and depressed, which means there's high intensity and there's low intensity, which I think often go hand in hand. I describe depression and anxiety often as unfortunate twins. So, Annika, I don't know if you maybe want to respond to that.
Werner, what I usually do is I figure out what's the most prominent or bothersome emotion, and then we deal with that first, and trying which is most limiting from a functional point of view, and then address that first.
Okay. Corinne, I don't know if you've dealt with it once or twice. So Corinne is head of our adolescent program. I don't know, maybe specifically pertaining to adolescents, I know it's often both at the same time. So I don't know, maybe one or two things just pertaining to crisis survival skills. What are some of the things that you found useful?
So Werner, I think, as you say, anxiety and depression occurs together a lot of the times. What I found is that it really helps when we use the DBT skills to focus on the behavior that we're trying to lessen. So whether that is anxiety-based or depression-based is not the most important thing in that crucial moment. What is important is to teach a skill so that the behavior doesn't occur that often and the urges are controlled. I think there's a great space for discovering which one is first and which one to regulate best in your individual therapy approach with your individual DBT therapist. But in skills training specifically, I like to focus on what they understand about their behavior and how to manage that with skills. So we also use the chain analysis, like you explained earlier, where we can look at and not necessarily and you can also send us an email if you want more specific information about upcoming trainings. Bye.
Hi guys, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
So sorry, the internet connection on my side dropped. I'm not sure what happened, but anyway, I'm back. Corinne, I just caught you right at the end there, basically saying training opportunities that's coming ahead. I'll introduce that a little bit later. I'm so sorry. Like I said, things on my side just dropped. I don't know if you guys answered the question about what happens if a person cannot remember what the prompting event was. Okay, so I'll answer that question. So I often find this because, remember, behavior, especially when someone comes to therapy, is not necessarily conscious. So they're doing things that they're not aware of. They might not be aware of, and so this is often where a person and I sit together and we first flesh out what is the problem behavior. That's the first part. We flesh out what exactly is it that happened. And remember, I'm going to repeat this a few times, but DBT is a behavioral therapy. So we're looking at what are the behaviors that cause this person consequence, because that's why they came to DBT. If they then say, I don't know how it happened, then it's important that we can work backwards towards what was the prompting event. So we say, what happened before that? What happened before that? What happened before that? So it's literally a behavioral chain analysis. We're looking at behaviors, and we're rewinding from where the person did the problem behavior, because now we fleshed out what the problem behavior is, what was it that happened. We're working backwards to the prompting event. So if a person is not aware of the prompting event, that's why they're in therapy, because they actually came in to see, well, how did this happen? Because they're doing things and they're not always aware of why they're doing it. And I think that's what's causing themselves and the people around them negative consequences. So I hope that answers your question around, what happens if a person cannot remember what the prompting event was. Please just respond to that. The person who asked the question, I'll gladly offline also answer it. Yeah. So I see there's a question, what do I do when I avoid work situations because of COVID fear? People prefer me, not my locum. Okay, I don't know if anybody wants to respond to that maybe.
Hi, Werner.
Yes.
Hi, team. Yes, so I wanted to just jump in there just based on what you've just said. And I was looking at that in terms of the problem behavior, in terms of avoidance. And to exactly, just to do a chain analysis in terms of what are the difficulties, what are the aspects that are being avoided. Is the concern about, interacting with patients? Is it the environment? And then it's also about, being mindful. So looking back at our previous sessions, so it's also about accepting that this is a situation, we're in a crisis mode, but what can you do? Is it something that can you maybe screen your patients a bit better? Can we, have like what we do here at Crescent Clinic, and is, to have questions to try and minimize the risk of exposure. So it's about being proactive in terms of managing the prompting events so that we can try and minimize the problematic behavior.
Right. Excellent. Annika, I don't know, you and Karine, maybe some of the measures you've put in place, because we're all client facing, what are some of the measures you've put in place in terms of your own practices, just to make sure that you're also safe in this regard? Because I hear what the person is saying. They're saying, actually, I've got fear around COVID-19, but I also realize I've got an obligation, because I think this is the paradox for us as therapists and as healthcare professionals. We've got an obligation to our clients, but on the other side, we've also got an obligation to our families and to our own safety. So Annika, I don't know if you and Karine maybe want to share some of the things that you've put in place.
So I'll go first. I think for me, it's definitely mitigating the fear and the risk versus responsibility and serving our patients, because we need to serve our patients. And it's definitely that reality acceptance thing of, if I put this in place and I do everything I can to ensure my own safety and my patient's safety, I need to trust that it will work out as it should in the end, because we only have control over so much. So I allude again back to what Miriam said, that serenity prayer. It's typically that thing, what can I control and what I can't control, and do what I need to do. It might be that you feel you need to put on full PPE when seeing your patients. If it's practical, do that. I see with the hospital where we are still doing groups and assisting patients, it's quite difficult to facilitate a group with a face mask on. So what do we do, and to ensure that the social distancing is done properly, etc., etc. So the fear is real. I think don't deny the fear. Address it within yourself, and do what I suggested. Karine, over to you.
Thanks, Annika. I think there's some practical things that I've put in place, like Miriam described: screening, questions. I'm trying to minimize people in waiting areas, so not booking people back to back, and trying to minimize contact between people coming in. I have been moving most of the work that I've been doing online, and that has been working very well for me. I've also done some skills training groups online. And I must admit, I think, especially with adolescents that I work with, we're in a generation that's very comfortable to be online. And that's been working very well. I think the most important part for me was managing the fear in myself and realizing that I can also, it's like glitter, you just never know how it got onto you. So you can also get it when you take your dustbin in from your home. And I think so using a lot of these the stress tolerance skills, like Vanna said earlier, I also enjoy using the self-soothing skill or the breathing, and really just managing my thoughts around this fear, to make sure that I don't go into a panic myself.
Okay. All right. Thanks so much, guys. So if there are any more questions, you're welcome to send them through. We can answer them offline as well. I thought I'd just we've got about 7 minutes left. And I thought I'd just answer a couple of questions that people have had, especially pertaining to future training and what's next, etc. So I'm going to share the screen again for, for the session. So, if you're one of the three different categories here to learn and listen, you're obviously looking for what are the training opportunities that is coming up. If you're looking to link up, and I think that's more to do with, I want to join more consistent group, like for example, I know a lot of people are part of supervision groups, a lot of people are also part of journal clubs. And I suppose what makes the Renew group a little bit different is that the focus is on you as the therapist, and it's therapy for the therapist more than so much about getting more knowledge, as it is about you having a space where you can say, well, this is time that I can invest, that I can actually learn something new, but it's also a place where I can say, oh, guys, I actually need assistance. And suppose the last thing then is I need support or motivation. We are connected at the moment. We are connected to SASO, TASA, SASOP, and I mean other organizations as well. But these are the three main ones. So when looking at training opportunities, so before I go there, the one thing we have done in terms of the DBT Institute, you'll see the DBT Campus idea. So the DBT Campus is basically, it's something that we're going to launch within the next 2 weeks, and it's a full online campus of treatment. So it's going to be anything from individual treatment to group treatment for adolescents, for adults. So it's a full package of treatment that is available online. So we already run skills groups, we run 16-week adolescent groups, we run 24-week adult groups, all of which are going to be online. We are running our trainings, we are running, I can just jump to that very quickly. So this is an example. We've got level 1, 2, and 3 training. So this is an example of our level 1 training, which is coming up in May. So we'll send a bit more information a bit later on. But the point is, this is an example of our level 1 training. We look at foundations and skills training. It's 2 full days of training. We get 7 CPD points per day, and it's quite it's in depth. So it's myself and Hanneke doing the training. Hanneke is the head of our skills training. Our level 2 training, for example, is where it's myself using DBT in individual therapy, where we take a full day just on what are the tools, what are the skills I can actually use. I want to use DBT individual therapy. And then the second day of our level 2 training thing, that would be where we jump into it. Dr. Miriam Close jumps into the ethics and also legalities around suicide risk assessment, but also around dealing with patients who are high risk. And that's obviously where you get a lot of your ethics points. And the second part of day 2 then is where we jump into specifically relating to DBT. What are the ethics around using DBT? So that's our level 1 and level 2. And then we've got obviously level 3 training. But this is an example of our level 1 training that you're seeing in front of you. Then we've got a comprehensive training, which is a 12-month program, which it's divided over 8 different days of workshops. And that's for you if you say, oh, Vanna, I'm really interested in DBT and I want to actually use it as part of my practice. And I want to use it more, I want to use it as part of my individual therapy. I might want to start a group. I want to really jump into DBT both feet and say, I'm looking for more exposure, but also I'm looking for a form of supervision. I'm looking for other people to connect with. And what's the exciting part is we were going to do it in person. We were going to start in May. But what we've done now is we've taken our whole comprehensive training online. So you can actually be anywhere in the country and you can access this training, especially the first 6 workshops. The last workshop we still have to see what we're going to do in terms of whether we want to do it in person or we want to do it online as well. But the point is, we've liaised with basically Marshall and Ann's Behavioral Tech. We've liaised with the Australian DBT Institute, and we're very comfortable that we can actually say we're going to do a comprehensive training fully online. So if you want to join, we're going to send, within the next week, we're going to send a bit more information specifically pertaining to that. If you've got any questions, please send it through. If you're sending it in the chat column at the moment, please also email it, because I think one of the challenges we have is that obviously the chat, the moment we close the conversation, the chat goes away. So the moment we end the session, and especially if there's a Q&A question that you haven't had answered, you're more than welcome to email it through to us. I usually forward it on to the appropriate person. If it's occupational therapy related, I forward it to Hanneke. If it's specifically related to psychiatry, then I forward it to Dr. Klaus. If it's related to adolescents, I forward that to Karin. And for all the rest, if it's administrative, etc., then I answer the question myself. Okay. Guys, that is the end of our 3 weeks. Maybe I can say in terms of renew groups, they are going to continue. We're going to take a break next week. And the reason why we're taking a break is because we obviously want to give you guys we're actually busy with our next 3 week series, and we'll just let you guys know how we're going to do that as well. Karin, Hanneke, Dr. Klaus, I don't know if you maybe want to just also maybe final thoughts, ideas. We've come to the end of our very first 3 week series. I don't know if you want to maybe say goodbye or maybe have some final thoughts. While we are also sharing final thoughts, please in the chat column, just maybe say how the last 3 weeks have been for you. We're very open to feedback and see how we can do things better. Please, while we are saying goodbye, please in the chat column, just share some of your experience for the last 3 weeks. Karin, Hanneke, Miriam, I don't know if you want to share some final thoughts.
Miriam, you go first.
Thanks, Hanneke. So thank you everybody for joining us on the series. I hope it has been educational, informative, fun, and that we've all learned. I mean, for myself as a panelist, it's also been a wonderful opportunity to learn and share and you know, just sharing and growing. So thank you so much, Werner, for this and for all the training, and to my fellow panelists. Thank you for all your support. And yeah, please stay safe out there and stay sane. And looking forward to seeing you in our trainings.
Okay.
Yes, everybody, I think as I'm watching the chats come in, a lot of people are saying that it sparked the interest in DBT and they'd like to learn more. I think what I can just say from the experience that I've had with DBT so far is it's an amazing modality, and it really works very well with a very big range of clients. So I really want to encourage you guys to contact Werner and just discover this path further, because it's really helpful as a therapist and for your clients. And stay safe, and hope to see you guys soon again.
From my side, it was a wonderful experience to be part of this journey. Also from an OT perspective, DBT has changed the way that I do therapy and really empower people. What I love about DBT is that the power does not lie with the therapist, the power lies with the patient. So we basically empower people and to dip in and dip out when they really need us to remind them of the skills, but love DBT just because it's so powerful to help people.
Excellent. All right, so that is a wrap for this week. We are going to start our next renew group in 2 weeks. But apart from that, we're going to send you more information in regards to the training. Thank you so much for joining us this last 3 weeks. My panel, I mean, it's been amazing to have you guys, and it's been a privilege to have you guys as part of the panel. And yeah, I hope to see you guys again soon, online or in person. I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and please stay safe. Goodbye.